I'm excited to introduce two of my colleagues here from MadPow. So we've got Nedret Sahin and Liz Possee Corthell, and they are experienced designers at MadPow, and they're excited to share some interesting work they've been focused on. So Ned and Liz have been working on client work that's exploring the employee experience of the future in light of this pandemic, of course. Their work and their talk explores the answer to the question, what does the future of work look like? From workspaces to work styles and the tools we use, Nedret and Liz share strategies you can implement today that help drive the future of work. So, Nedret and Liz?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nedret, and I'm a senior experience designer and strategist at MadPow.
And hello, everyone. My name is Liz, and I am an experienced strategist at MadPow. And today we're going to be talking to you about creating a resilient remote culture today to design the future of work tomorrow. So a few months ago, Nedret and I started a project with a large company to help them figure out how to safely return to the office. So as strategists, this involved meeting with stakeholders, interviewing employees, building service blueprints, journey maps, storyboards, and scenarios, explaining how we might safely return employees to the office. But as we moved from spring to summer, we realized that the pandemic would not be the short-term reality that we had predicted. We realized that the ways we're currently living, socializing, and working right now might extend further into 2021 and even beyond. So as we move from summer to fall, we've started to formulate our final recommendations for shaping the future of work for our client. We're excited to share the insights we've gained thus far and invite you to consider how you might apply them to your organization. So as the spring turned into summer, we started thinking about our question, which was, how might we return to work safely? We started to transition it to, what does the future of work look like? We started thinking about how to frame this question and what tools we can best use in order to think strategically about the ways we work and collaborate together.
As framing, we used futures thinking. It's where we consider what things are likely to change or stay the same in the future. Considered by some to be an art and others to be a science, futures thinking gives us a framework to talk about our current world and how the world may look like in the future. It is importantly not attempting to predict the future. Instead, it's about understanding that there are many possible futures and that it's our job to make decisions today that lead us to the preferable futures of tomorrow.
So in order to approach this question of what does the future of work look like, we looked at the futures cone shown here. On the left is where we are today, and on the right, we see all the possible futures that lay ahead. These are illustrated in purple, teal, red, and gold, and they represent the futures that we're headed towards. We see that when we look ahead, most of these futures are possible. Several of them are probable, and a few of them are preferable. In future studies, this cone is known as the 3 Ps and a W foresight model, with the W being wildcards. Wildcards can be anything and everything from alien invasion to a global pandemic.
And when confronting all possible futures, we want to narrow our focus to the most probable future in the near term. To do this, we examined how we're working right now from home. Specifically, we wanted to learn what's driving burnout and recharge cycles in employees who are working remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic, in the hopes that we might identify ways that we can build and evolve a resilient remote culture now and into the future. Dimensions of burnout and recharge that we are most interested in include social connection, boundaries, culture, and autonomy. Let's look at these dimensions and what our research uncovered in a little more detail.
So our secondary research highlighted a few trends in these areas. Unsurprisingly, social connection is more challenging when we're remote and leaves teams feeling like every interaction must be scheduled or made into a meeting. It's made worse by the fact that video conferencing just isn't perfect, and it's not fulfilling all of our needs to connect. When it comes to setting boundaries, it's even harder to do while working remotely. And this trend has the average American working up to 3 extra hours a day or unable to unplug at the end of the day. And in terms of culture, remote teams are really concerned that they're running smoothly today based on the pre-COVID in-person relationships that they had formed before. This is a growing concern when it comes to hiring or onboarding new teammates. And when it comes to autonomy, holdover norms and beliefs about remote work aren't sustainable now that remote has shifted from once in a while to all day, every day. We used to consider remote working to be a privilege and would often use this thought process to push ourselves to work extra hours to prove that we can be efficient remotely. Now, this behavior trend is leading towards increased burnout. So to combat these challenges of remote working, we have moved into the phase of experimentation to see what the possible future could look like. So as we've examined the most probable future for the short term, we want to expand our thinking into other areas of the future's cone. So we want to start looking at what might be possible or even preferable.
And when we consider what might be possible, we wanted to look at unique ways people are connecting and collaborating today. These include some unique things that you can bring back to your teams as we continue to work remotely. The first area we found interesting is video games. For example, some companies are holding meetings in the 2019 open world game Red Dead Redemption. Companies are utilizing the online feature that allows users to ride in on their horses to a shared location and enjoy a conversation around the campfire. Other companies are holding meetings and tech conferences in the 2020 Nintendo release Animal Crossing: New Horizons. Conveniently, this release came out in March, just in time to connect folks across the country or across the world virtually, when physical connection became more scarce with the onset of the pandemic. Video games are playful, but they also have the benefit of giving people a virtual body, something that we've heard people express missing in other collaboration tools. Speaking of collaboration tools, there are more obvious ones, like the digital whiteboarding tools Mural and Miro that we use as strategists and designers at MadPow, or other design tools like Adobe XD and Figma that allow multiple designers to work on the same file at real time, which we've been using more heavily now too. However, there are also some newer tools that are likely to grow in popularity because they resemble what it's like to be together in person. High Fidelity is one of those tools. You're seeing a screenshot from it here. It's a top-down view of a virtual soundscape that emulates how you would hear someone in real life. You're in a space together where you can move around. The closer you get, the better you can hear someone. The further you move away, the harder it is to hear them. You can hear them from one ear if you're on one side of them. And our team has been using High Fidelity as a supplement to video chats. We actually find that it's easier to focus on complex tasks when we're not conscious that we're being watched. Especially if we're working in a tool like Miro, as we often do, it's quite simple to follow the conversation when you have a visual. Another tool that resembles what it's like to be in person together is Tandem, as in working in tandem. It's a virtual office for remote teams, and it's built to help teams flow while they're working from home. It lets you see which org apps people are working in, kind of like Slack, but if you were to see a notification or a little badge next to them to show that they're in Microsoft Word, for example. And it also lets you join them if, for example, you have access to that same file. It lets you see which people are in a conversation together in open rooms, and you can see who's in there and decide if you want to join them, and even lock the conversation after if you don't want others to join. Another area we investigated were physical workspaces. This image here is actually from 2018, when LL Bean created an outdoor office. While this may have seemed a little gimmicky in 2018, it's a reality today and becoming even more of a reality in the future. Companies are piloting outdoor office programs, they're renting parks, bringing in tech and infrastructure, and even bathroom and kitchen facilities for employees to utilize throughout their workday. Here's another office concept. This is called the Light Pod. It's created by a British company called Pod Space. They offer turnkey solutions for residential, commercial, or educational buildings, and this is their 9-to-5er pod. While we become accustomed to seeing variations of these in offices to help provide privacy, they might have found a new target demographic. The office worker who no longer wants to work in an office, but desperately needs boundaries between work and life. Lastly, Steelcase, a longtime player in architecture, furniture, and technology, has been creating concept for shared post-COVID workplaces. As one might expect, there's a heavy focus on smaller individual spaces for solo work and shielded open spaces for team collaboration.
So as we navigate through the possible and probable futures, this is where we must consider what the most preferable future is for the biggest number of people. So we pose the following questions for you to consider as leaders and innovators in your organizations. What do you want the future to look like? We're also going to propose some experiments or thought-provoking ideas on each subject. Some will be wild and some will be more mild. We encourage you to consider these, and even though some of the wild ideas may seem far off, we wanted to use the futures thinking framework from one of the founders of Future Studies, Jim Dator. Any useful statement about the future should appear to be ridiculous, which is something you should consider when thinking about the future, particularly if it's deemed unnecessary or ridiculous by teammates or others. We encourage your bravery to sit with the ridiculous and think about how it might benefit your team long term. So when we think about how might we make remote work more sustainable, a wild idea is to consider moving to a 4-day work week. This is something we're already starting to see in a lot of Eastern European countries, and countries like New Zealand are considering moving to a 4-day work week in order to reinvigorate the economy after following the COVID-19 pandemic. A more mild idea, however, could be to create a 10-minute buffer in between meetings so that people aren't stuck in front of their computer the whole time if meetings start 10 minutes later after the hour or 10 minutes before. That way people just have a little bit more time to get up and stretch and get a drink of water in between meetings.
When thinking about how we ensure that our workplaces are diverse and inclusive, a wild idea might be to get rid of resumes and do task and scenario-based hiring for a diverse workplace, or to create a workplace with no racial majority to create an inclusive workplace. Kaiser Permanente actually recently was recognized as a company that doesn't have a racial majority, and it's considered a very inclusive workplace. A mild idea, however, might be to just supplement resumes with task and scenario-based questions for diversity and rotate internal meeting leads to have a more inclusive culture. If, for example, you have a morning stand-up, perhaps the same PM doesn't lead it every morning. Every person on the team can get a chance to lead.
And when we think about how might we create workplaces that work for parents, a wild idea is to reuse our unused office space that we're not currently occupying as childcare facilities for employees. A more mild idea, however, is just to allow employees to have more flexible scheduling time so that they can have a little bit better work-life balance as they're both balancing being a parent and being an employee during these times.
When thinking about how we ensure we hire the best talent, a wild idea might be to allow your employees to work remotely forever, like Microsoft recently announced and other tech firms had announced before them. A more mild idea, however, might be to just allow your employees to work remotely a few days a week, if especially they've gotten used to it during times of the pandemic.
And when we think about how might we help employees have more comfortable home offices, a wild idea might be to hire a designer that is for the purpose of designing the remote employee experience, which is definitely a wild idea, but something that Facebook just did recently. But when we think about a more mild version, something we can do is let employees take the furniture from the office home if it's not being used in the office right now. For instance, I'm actually on my MadPow office chair that I borrowed from the office so I can have a more ergonomic setup while I'm working from home right now.
When thinking about how we keep up with tech infrastructure and tools, a wild idea might be to invest in the cloud, if you're not already, to rebuild for scale and a consistent experience, both for your employees and for your customers. If that feels too far-fetched, however, a more mild idea might be to just supply your employees with better devices. These could be laptops, iPads, or remote access VPN clients if they need to access a VPN remotely.
So when we think about how might we create successful onboarding experiences for new employees that are hired while we're remote, a wild idea is to have an onboarding buddy with a little bit of a budget too. So someone who's in the company already who can help the onboarding new employee become more acclimated, become more comfortable, and maybe with a little bit of a budget so that they can both get DoorDash or order a meal from the same restaurant and enjoy it remotely so that they can socialize a little bit in between the onboarding experience. And a more mild version of that idea, though, is to have dedicated time for non-work related conversation on people's schedules. So thinking about how we all miss the water cooler chat and we all miss the coffee chat because it's really just how we connect with our coworkers. We build those soft connections with people across the office that we might not work with day to day. Something people really are missing, and it's something that really helps benefit a new employee onboarding, is creating those soft ties to other people in the company. So we might be able to work in some time on the schedule for folks to be able to make those connections together.
Another thing we've been thinking about is how might we sustain company culture, especially if we're mostly remote and we barely get together in person. A wild idea here might be to plan an offsite with company-covered COVID testing so that people can meet at least once in person. If that feels a little bit too wild, a more mild idea might be to hold dedicated time on schedules for socialization and connection that don't go past the workday. So don't have a 5 p.m. happy hour, maybe have it at 4 p.m. so it doesn't add that extra stress of needing to be on after work.
So as we've proposed some ideas and some thought experiments, we wanted to leave them up here at the end so you can have an opportunity to take a screenshot. We hope you're excited about some of these ideas, be they some of the mild ones or some of the more wild ones if you dare. Our clients already started to implement some of these ideas, particularly on the mild variety of creating a 10-minute buffer in between meetings, and employees are already starting to see the results of being able to stretch a little bit more and get up so they're not in front of their computer screen all day. So think about some of the ways that these strategies might be able to work for your workforce.
And if we consider it our job to make decisions today that lead us to the preferable solutions, or futures rather, of tomorrow, what are some things that you're going to try? And if anything we said today resonated with you, we're happy to connect, and we'll also be around for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Listen to this reaction we're getting.
Wow. The crowd.
That was good. Not too long, right? Awesome job, both of you. Thank you so much. I find this topic very, very interesting, and I know I've tracked along with this work that you're doing for a client of ours, and it's one of the more interesting things we've done in a long time. So I'm interested to ask some questions here on behalf of the audience. So a couple questions I'll filter through. First, is futurist thinking having a moment? Are companies considering this new reality in your estimation?
Yeah, I definitely think, yeah, of course. I definitely think that futurist thinking is having a moment. If nothing else, I think that this pandemic has made us realize how connected we are in many ways across the globe, and how our future has consequences, and that the future might not look exactly the way that today or tomorrow looks like. It could look a little different, and that moments like this really give us some time and some reflection to really start saying, let's think about what we really want the future to look like and how do we get there. So I do think futures thinking is having a moment, and I'm excited to be a part of that moment.
Excellent. Here's a provocative question. Is the office dead?
That is a provocative question. I don't know if it's fully dead yet, but it's slowly dying, at least in the way that we knew it. I think some of the research we've been reading is, offices are going to be used for collaboration space. the current paradigm is 20% is for collaboration space and 80% is for individual workstations, I think we're going to see a complete flip in that. I think we're going to see 20% is going to be kind of hot desking where people can come in if they want to work in an office facility. And then the rest of the space, I think, is going to be repurposed so that when people come together and they have large collaborative meetings, they can be together in the same space. So I don't think it's dead. I think it's evolving.
Mm-hmm. And if I could add, I think that the show The Office might one day be a historical relic of a bygone era. So we'll see where that goes.
That's interesting. I had never thought about that. People may look at that and say, "What are those people doing? Why are you? What kind of setup is that?" Yeah, it's not dead. I like how you're talking about it, Ned, where it's just evolving, and I'm interested just from a kind of strategy standpoint, what's it going to end up? And I think we're all trying to imagine it. We can see, I like the collaboration. I think I could see that happening. And for us hosting clients, it serves a purpose. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it ends up landing on. So good stuff.
Yeah,
there.
the BBC actually has a really interesting interactive article. If you check it out about the future of workspaces, it's a little bit dystopian, but it's an interesting, thought-provoking piece.
Very cool. Cool. Last question here. So for those that joined us at the Leadership Roundtable yesterday, I think we had 50 folks. We did an experiment at the end, thanks to both of you. It was something that I think you'd been looking into. It's a tool called High Fidelity, which, as you said, Ned, is not the greatest name of all time, but because it does not describe what it was. So maybe I'll attempt to describe it, and then I'll ask the question. So it was a VR space in a VR company that had pivoted to react to this new remote reality, and so it was a headphone experience and a visual of a sketch of an office space. And the way it worked is we could walk around, and as you walk closer to a conversation, you could start hearing it and the volume would start to increase. And it emulated very much what you would do in a networking cocktail hour where we're walking from one group to the next. So that's the intro. Now the question, what do you think about the tool and the place of tools like that in replacing some of the methods that we've just been so used to, where we can spend time together and we can do those things more organically? What's your take on a tool like High Fidelity?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we're finding in our research actually is that High Fidelity isn't a class or a category of tools that we find interesting. Our research is showing us that there's this formal layer of communication that has, it hasn't skipped a beat. If it actually is probably solidified a little bit more that we're remote, but this informal layer of communication is what's suffering. We don't have the water cooler talk like most people are talking about, or the passing someone in the office hallway and exchanging a quick conversation about what you're working on. Those connections are actually really important for the business. So what we've done is we've researched a few different tools, and one of them is High Fidelity. So anything that emulates what it's like to be together in a space together, we're really interested in tools that can kind of help that. So High Fidelity is one of them. Tandem is another one that we talk about in the presentation, where you can kind of see what people are working on as if you were in the same space. And there are a few others that we're really interested in because we think they're nice supplements to video chat, because the Zoom fatigue is real, and it is nice to not have to watch myself as I talk to you.
Right. Yep, that's great. Very good answer. I think we're at time here. Quick note for folks. We didn't get to all the Q&A. If we don't get to your question, I would encourage you to send it in through Twitter and use the hashtag FXD 2020. And folks like Nedret and Liz are on all the time and be happy to answer some of those questions, as probably our other speakers would as well. So thank you both for being here. Appreciate the presentation, and thanks.
Thanks. Sure. It's been a pleasure.